Hello everyone. Welcome to this online tutorial on the creation of storage bins using templates in SAP Warehouse Management. Before we start, a quick recap of what we did in the previous tutorial. We understood what is the structure of a warehouse in SAP, and then we also went to SAP system and did create a structure there. At the top, we created warehouse W20, which had a couple of storage types. One of them was Hyrex, so we named it HRK. And under this storage type, we created two storage sections, one for fragile items, we named it FRG, and there was another one meant for all other regular non-fragile items. We called it REG. We also created a couple of storage bins using the transaction LS01N. And then we discussed a very important question. Is it really feasible to create thousands of bins manually one by one using the transaction LS01N? And of course, the answer is it's not possible. And actually, we don't have to, because there are many ways with which we can create thousands of bins in one go. From SAP also supports us creating all these bins, in a much more efficient way. Okay, so in this tutorial, we would try to learn how we can actually do that using the templates. Okay, so with this, let's move on. Okay, so we start with the same example of the warehouse W20, and we would be talking about the storage type HRK, which we created in the previous tutorial. Okay, now let's say we have been saying that this storage type HRK uses high racks to store the finished goods. But let's say in reality, these high racks are spread across 5 physical racks. Okay, and the organization has named them rack A, B, C, D, and E for a clear-cut demarcation between them. Okay, and let's say that each of these racks has 40 stacks and 8 levels. Okay, so each of these racks has 320 storage bins. So 40 stacks, 8 levels, which means 320 storage bins, which also means that in total in these 5 racks, we have a total of 1600 storage bins. Okay, easy so far. Let's also quickly talk about the way the organization names its bins. And as we have discussed in the previous tutorial, organizations generally adopt a coordinated structure to name their bins. Okay, so the one that we would use in this example is something like this. So we would be using this template. So the first part would represent the rack, then there would be a hyphen, the next 2 digits would represent the stack in that particular rack, then a hyphen as a separator, and then the last 2 digits would represent the level. So with this, we would be able to reach the bin using its coordinates in a very precise manner. Okay, so we would be using this structure for this example. Okay, so let's now talk about the sequences. When we talk about creating these bins in a masked way, we have to work with sequences. Now, talking about these 5 racks, can we think of a sequence which would cover all the bins from all these 5 racks? And as you can see on the screen, one possible sequence is from A0101 until E4008. So what it means is, if we can somehow create a sequence which would start from the first bin in rack A, so in the first stack and first level, so a bin somewhere over here, and then if we can go all the way to rack E, stack 40 and level 8. So if we can somehow define a sequence like this, and then if we can somehow use this sequence to create all these bins in just one go, that would be great, right? So this is about sequence. Of course, we would talk about the sequences more in detail when we hit the SAP system. But the idea here is to think how we can actually come up with sequences that can cover all the bins available in the system. Okay, now let's complicate the situation a little bit. We again are talking about 5 racks, but then we have an exception. We have a constructional element. We have a beam at the ceiling, which leaves rack B only with 7 levels. So we do not have 8 levels in rack B, we have only 7 levels in rack B. On top of that, there's another requirement that the rack D and the rack E, I mean, in these 2 racks, the lowermost 2 levels belong to storage section FRG, which is meant for fragile items. And all other higher levels belong to storage section REG, so meant for the regular items. Okay, so this is a small deviation from the previous situation that we just discussed. Okay, so this would now mean that in rack B, because we have only 7 levels, so we would have 280 bins instead of 320, which drops the total from 1600 to 1560 bins in the situation. Now, let's try to understand how we can define sequences to cover all these bins in this type of a situation. Okay, so of course there are more than one way how we can do it, but this is just one possibility. But you can come up with more number of sequences, you can optimize, but the ultimate goal is that we should, using all these sequences, we should be able to cover all the bins whatsoever available in the system. Okay, so let's say we define the first sequence, which starts from A0101 and then it goes until C4007. So it starts from the bin available somewhere here, and then it goes to rack C, stack 40 and level 7. So this sequence actually covers the first 7 levels of rack A, B and C. Okay, let's say then we define the second sequence, which starts from A0108 and it goes to A4008. So it starts from A first stack and the 8th level, and then it goes until A 40th stack and 8th level. So it covers the topmost layer of rack A. Similar to that, we create another sequence for rack C, which covers the topmost layer of rack C. Okay, so with these 3 sequences, we can actually cover all the bins available in rack A, B, and C. We had to come up with 3 sequences because there was an exception. Otherwise, simply we could have had just one sequence starting from A0101 and going until C4008. But then we could not do that because there was a break in between. Okay, but now we have covered all the bins in the first 3 racks. Now let's go to sequence 4. It starts from D0101 and then it goes until E4002. Okay, so it starts from the first bin of rack D and then it goes to rack E 40th stack and second level. Why did we have to do that? Because the bins from these lowermost 2 levels from these 2 racks actually belong to section FRG. So that's why we had to create a different sequence, a separate sequence for these bins. Okay, and then finally we have to come up with the last sequence, which starts from D0103, so meaning the bin somewhere here, and then it will go until E4008. So it will go to rack E, then stack 40 and level 8. So with these 5 sequences put together, we can actually cover all 1560 bins spread across these 5 racks, and we can also take care of assigning the bins to different sections, right? So I hope the idea here how we have to define the sequences is clear. So with that idea, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so in this slide, we actually try to understand how we define the sequence in SAP system, right? We have been talking that about the sequences that we can divide all the bins across multiple sequences, but how do we actually do that in the system? So for that, I'm taking the first sequence as an example, which means we have to create the bins starting from A0101 until C4007. So the first 7 levels of rack A, B, and C, and the bins have to belong to section REG. Okay, so let's now focus on this sequence. How will we create the bins for this sequence? To define the sequence, we have to understand what is a template, what is the structure, what is the start value, what is the end value, and what is increment, because these are the elements which put together make or define a sequence in the SAP system. So first, let's talk about the template. Template is a 10 digits long string which has 3 elements, A, C, and N. It can have one of these 3 possible values, okay, at each of these 10 positions. A means, A represents alphabet. So if you have any alphabet in the bin structure, then we have to enter A in that position. C is for any constant or common character. So in our case, because we have hyphen, which does not change, it's kind of a constant. So we have to give C. N represents a numeric value. So if we have any numeric value in the naming convention of our bins, then we have to enter N at those positions. So of course, because we have 0, 1, and 400107. So at those positions we have to enter n, and then again we have a c in between, right, because we have the hyphen. What is also important to notice that if we are not using all 10 digits which are allowed in SAP system for naming the storage bins, then the blanks also have to be defined as C in the template, right? So in our example of the sequence, the template has to be A, C, and N, C, and N, C, C, C. So this would be the template for this sequence. We'll come back to structure. Let's first discuss the start value. I mean, it's self-explanatory. So we have to start from A-01-01. So we just have to enter the same value here, A-01-01. Similarly, we can also give the ending value. So C-40-07. Cool. Let's now talk about the increment. Increment tells SAP what should be the gap between any two successive values that it would create, right? So for example, if we talk about this value 01, we have to start from 01 and we have to go until 40, but then what should be the gap between any two consecutive bins? So it has to be 1. So we start with 01 and then we go for 02, 03, 04, and then we go until 40. If for whatever reason, if we give this increment 02, then we would start with 01 and the next bin would have 03 and then 05, right? So this is the gap between the two consecutive bins for this value. Okay, now let's come back to structure. Structure tells SAP which digits should be grouped together from the perspective of applying the increment. So in this example, we are entering B, B for these two positions. What it does, it actually groups together this 0 and 1. So which means that SAP does not have to treat these two digits separately from each other. It jointly becomes one number. So this is not 0 and 1, this is now 0, 1, right? So one number. Similarly, this is not 4 and 0, this is 40. Okay, and then on this group, we have to apply an increment of 1. So we have to start from 1 and then we have to go until 40. So 01, 02, 03, and then all the way until 40. Same goes here. We have C, C, because it is the same alphabet used. It groups this position and this position. So system would not treat 0 and 1 separately. It would treat it as one number, and then it will apply an increment of 1, and the end value would be 07. So it would start from 01, then it will go until 07. Okay, so this is how the template, the structure, the start value, the end value, and the increment works together. You would understand it better when we actually do it in the SAP system. It's actually not easy to explain this in words, especially this part. Okay, so with this, let's go to the SAP system. Before that, I'll quickly show this slide once again to you. Okay, so we are going to create 5 sequences, and then finally we would see how we can actually use these sequences to create all those 1560 bins in the system. Okay, so the transaction to start is again SPRO, implementation guide. We then go to logistics execution, warehouse management, master data, storage bins, and then the last node which says define storage bin structure. Click on this one. Okay, and then new entries. Okay, so the first field is for the warehouse number. We are talking about warehouse W20, and we are creating the sequence for storage type HRK and the first sequence, right? As you know, we are going to create 5 sequences. Okay, so template. We go back to the slide. The first template is, okay, the slide. So our template is ACNN, ACNN, CNNCCC, CNNCCC. Okay, so this is what we discussed. And okay, so let's first enter this start value. We have to start from A0101, and then we have to go until C4007. The increment has to be something like this, and then finally we write the structure. So A, BB, and CC. Right, so this is what we discussed here. So we are now creating the sequence starting from A0101 going until C47, and this is what we have used in SAP system to define this sequence. We also have to enter the storage section to which all these bins would belong to when they are created. So these are going to belong to the storage section REG. Hit enter. Okay, everything is okay. Otherwise, we would have got some error message. Save it. It is transportable. So save it to mini transport. Okay, so the first one is created. Now let's go back again, click on new entries. Okay, better we should have copied the one that we have created. Okay, so let's position it to W20 HRK and copy it because we can reuse some part of this definition. So this is going to be the second sequence number. Copying makes sense because at least the template and the structure are not going to change. Okay, only the start value and the end value and maybe the storage section would change. So we go back to the slide. Now we have to create it from A0108 to A4008. So the topmost layer of rack A, and the increment and the structure remains the same. And these bins also are going to belong to the regular storage section. Hit enter if everything is okay. We can save it. Let's copy it again. And the third sequence is the topmost layer of rack C. So we just need to change A and make it C. So everything else remains the same. Also the storage section, they all belong to the regular storage section. Hit enter. Oh, sorry, we forgot to change this. Hit enter and save. Now copy it again. This time we would be creating the sequence 4 for the lowermost two sections of rack D and E, which belong to storage section REG. Sorry, FRG, the fragile items. So D0101 and going until E4002. The increment remains the same, but the storage section this time would be fragile items. Hit enter and save. Okay, so we are done with the 4 sequences. Let's also create the 5th one. Copy any one of these, enter the sequence number 005. We now have to create the higher levels of rack D and E, which belong to the regular storage section. So we have to change this, and it goes until level 8, and the storage section is now REG. Save it. So with this we have covered all the 5 sequences. The 4th one belongs to section FRG. Okay, so this was about creating the sequences in the system. We have created 5 sequences which would cover all 1560 bins which I need to create in the system. Another important point which I think we discussed also in the last tutorial is that the definition of these sequences is actually transportable. So we define them in the development system, then we move it to quality and then to production system. But of course, because the storage bins are master data, you have to create them in all the environments one after another. So you first have to create them in the development system if you want to, and then you have to also create them in quality and then in production. But of course, before you can do that, this particular transport has to be moved to that particular environment. Okay, now let's come back to the part where we actually use these sequences and create the storage bins. Okay, so the transaction for that is ls05. Did I correctly type it? /ols05. Yes, I did. The system is slow. Okay, it's opening now. Okay, so this is the UI of the transaction to automatically create storage bins using the sequence numbers that we just created. The transaction for this is ls05. So we need to enter the warehouse number, the storage type, and then the sequence number. So as you know, we have 5 sequences. We have to run this transaction for all those sequences one by one. So we are running it for the first one. When we run it, system prepares the list of storage bins that it would create. It shows you all the details. You can spend some time to verify it, and only when you are satisfied, you can actually click on a button which actually creates the storage bin. So running this transaction does not create the bins. It prepares a list and shows it to you. You can then verify it. If everything looks okay, then you can really create the bins. Okay, so let's wait for the system to prepare the list. Okay, so the list is prepared by SAP. Okay, you can see the starting value is A0101, and if you can scroll all the way until the end, it is going to create the bins until C4007. So meaning the first 7 levels of rack A, B, and C. Okay, and it also shows that these bins are going to belong to the storage section REG under storage type HRK. Okay, so once these basic checks are done, because everything looks okay, we can click on this button. There are two options. You can opt to create these bins in the background, or you can create them in the foreground. Because we are talking about maybe hundreds of bins, and yeah, so it shows the count as well. So it would be creating 840 bins. So we can actually decide to run that in the foreground. Yeah, we do want to create the bins. Okay, so it says 840 storage bins have been created. We can then run the same transaction with sequence 002. It gives the same details, the similar details, starting value, the end value, how many bins it would create, and to which storage section and storage type these bins would belong to. If everything is okay, we can click on this button, click yes. This time it was faster because only 40 bins. And the third sequence, run it. If everything is okay, I'll just click on this button because I know everything is okay. Sequence 4, create, yes. And then finally the fifth one. Okay, so creating them in the foreground again. Okay, so with this, we actually are done with the mass creation of the storage bins using the template. Just to verify if everything really worked, we can call the transaction LX02. Sorry, the transaction is LX03, which says bin status report. We can run it for HRK. Just run it. Let's see if we see all the bins in the list. Yeah, so now you can, okay, so these bins that you see at the top are the bins that we created yesterday for testing, but let's avoid them for now. So we have all the bins that we created just now using the sequences starting from A0101 and going all the way down to E4008. Okay, we can also verify this using the table LAGP. This is one table that you might want to remember because we would be coming across this quite often. This is the master data table for the storage bins in SAP WM. Okay, so W20 and HRK. Let's say how many bins do we have? It says we have 1564. 64 because we had 4 bins already created yesterday. So which means using the templates, we have now created 1560 bins. Okay, so with this we come to the end of this tutorial. I hope you could follow me and you could develop an understanding on how we can use the templates and the structures to mass create the bins. This tool is really very useful because in most of my previous projects I have really made use of this technique, and it becomes very important because storage bin is a master data which has to be created in the system one after another, right? So you first have to create all the bins in quality environment to test, and then you might have to create the same also in production system, which is a lot of work. So it makes sense that you define these sequences, move them to quality, use those sequences to first create the bins in quality, and then using the same transport you can also create the bins in production. Okay, it actually makes the life very easy. And yeah, so with this, I thank you for your time and attention. I hope you could benefit from this tutorial. If you like the video, maybe you can subscribe so that you get the notifications about all the subsequent videos that I would upload. With this, I wish you all the best and happy learning. Bye for now.